First of all, thank you for an amazing event to Tag Talks, and it's been such a pleasure of meeting like-minded people. So, how many of you here have broken a limb, an arm, and just let it hang off your elbow for days, weeks, or months? Sounds like a pretty ridiculous question, and on some level it is. But now let me ask you the next question. How many of you have processed your emotional pain or trauma as and when it comes up? I'd argue that most of us don't. My name's Poonam Bhuchar. I've been a corporate immigration attorney and family lawyer for 24 years. I authored a book called Safe from the Pain 2 years ago, based on my personal story and a method that I devised called the SAFE method to work through personal pain, trauma, no matter how big or small it is. From a young age, we're all told to tell the truth, tell the truth. But what nobody tells us is that telling the truth to yourself and about what you're feeling and who you are is the hardest thing in the world. You see, things that you can touch and feel are easy to talk about. I can stand here and tell you about how I fell down the stairs and broke my arm and what a fumbling idiot I am, and we can even laugh about it. But it's much harder for me to tell you about the time that I was sexually assaulted at school at 13 years old, and the whole high school knew about it and bullied me, and the pain in the pit of my stomach became so much that I just wanted to end it all. And I tried, and clearly I failed. How that shame, guilt, and detest for myself, especially coming from a South Asian culture, how I hated myself every single day and blamed myself for everything that had happened. How at the age of 21, I voluntarily entered into an arranged marriage that brought me from the UK to the US. How at the day I got married, I knew the person that I was marrying wasn't right for me. And I still stayed there. I stayed there for 13 years in an abusive marriage. It wasn't enough for me to get out for myself because I didn't find myself worthy to do so. But looking at my 4- and my 6-year-old kid, I didn't want them raised in that environment. So I left. I finally decided to file for divorce. Anybody that knows the South Asian culture, 17 years ago for me to do that was a big deal. I was the first person to be divorced in the community, had no family in the US at the time, and had a 4- and 6-year-old son and daughter, and was working part-time as a lawyer. There's enough research to show that your emotional state affects your mental state, as we just heard. We just need to take a look at the state of the corporate world right now to understand that over $1 trillion is lost in the global economy because of time taken off by employees due to depression, anxiety, and mental illness. We call it corporate burnout, but is it corporate burnout, or is it that we're not taking care of our emotional well-being? Is it that our corporate lives are infecting our personal lives, and our personal lives are affecting our corporate lives? I believe that the truth lies somewhere in between. You see, I, for 4 decades, ran away from who I was. I ran away from the pain. I became so disassociated from who I was that I actually didn't even know who I was or what I wanted. Practically from birth, we're taught it's okay to talk about physical pain. You know, our kids get hurt. We sit there and we put a boo-boo and we kiss their knees and we say, oh, you'll be okay. But emotional pain is inconvenient. Nobody knows how to talk about it. Nobody wants to discuss it. So what do? We shove it down. We make sure it goes deep, deep down. And we keep pretending it doesn't exist. We become so far removed from who we are. Some of us, as that pain rises, we try to numb it with vices, alcohol, drug addiction, different other types of addiction. But whether you deny that pain or you use a vice, it does nothing but lead to devastation in its wake. And why is that? because as Annie says, resistance is persistence. The thing that you try and resist the most will show up again and again and will get stronger and stronger until you actually deal with it. The truth is, the only way through emotional pain is to sit with it, is to acknowledge it. I got so tired of carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders and pretending that everything was okay, and I was just exhausted from life. And I knew that I wasn't put on this God-forsaken earth just to suffer in pain, that there had to be another answer to life. And I found it. Anybody who saw me in 2012 to 2020 said, "How did you get there?" And I look back at my life, and that's where I came up with the SAFE method, to work through emotional pain. The truth is, whether you're a child, teenager, or adult, we're all looking to be heard and feel validated. And we're all looking to feel emotionally safe. So what does the S stand for? Stop and acknowledge your pain. Even a train has to come to a stop at a train station, otherwise it crashes. Very much like our emotions. We can continue on the hamster wheel, we can bury ourselves in the sand with work, we can socialize, we can party, we can get drunk. I've done all those things. But at some point, it catches up. And there's enough research to show that your emotional well-being not only affects your mental state, but it also affects your physical state. In my mid-20s, I used to commute 4 hours a day to New York City when I recently graduated as a lawyer. And it used to hurt to rub soap on my body. I thought that was normal until I had a conversation with a friend and she said, "No, it's not." Went to the doctors and they diagnosed me with fibromyalgia. 25 years ago, fibromyalgia was not given the same credibility that it's given today. It's seen as something that was just a result of a traumatic event, and it was really supposed to be at least 25 years ago in your head. There was no way, as a young lawyer, that I was going to admit that there was anything wrong with me. So I took the medication, chucked it in the garbage. Don't recommend that anybody does that. And ignored it and continued living with the pain, going to work, loving my job, because all I wanted to do as a lawyer as 13 was be a lawyer. Perhaps because I'd suppressed my emotions so much that I wanted to be a voice for other people. Fast forward 2 years and 2 kids, beautiful kids later, something didn't feel right. Went to the doctors and the doctor said, "You know, Poonam, I think you're depressed." And I laughed out loud. Depressed? I've got 2 beautiful kids. I love my job. I don't have a shortage of money. Yeah, my marriage is a bit shit, but you know what? That's not depression. I socialize. I'm out there. I get up. That wasn't the picture of what the depression that I knew. I was functioning. To me, depression is you couldn't get out of bed. So again, I ignored it. Continued for another decade like that, under chaos and fog, not knowing, making any right decisions in my life. Everything came out of fear. Everything came out of insecurity and an absolute detest for myself. I lost my home. I had 2 children. The business that I was in partnership with sunk. So basically 2 kids, not much alimony because it all went into the home, and I had to figure out life in 2012. Fast forward a few years later, I started my own business. I started my own business in 2012. And I was sitting in my desk, and my associate came in and said, "Can you get something for me from?" And I said, "Sure." I couldn't get up off of my chair. I was wheelchaired into the hospital because I was paralyzed. And I was wheelchaired, had a spinal tap that went wrong, and still didn't want to really listen to anything, even though the new universe was knocking at my door. So rather than listen to everybody around me saying, "Oh, you know, Poonam, it's stress," I shut them all out. I sat there with my BlackBerry in the hospital bed, and the neurologist came in, snatched it out of my hands, and said, "If you don't stop, you're going to have a stroke." One would think that I'd become humble at that point, but the arrogance was so much, it was, you're being ridiculous. I'm not going to have a stroke at 38 years old. Fast forward a year, I had a stroke. Fast forward another 2 years, I had another stroke, and 2 children, and a business to run. See, the truth is, we have the signs, and the universe comes knocking at our door time and time again. But why do we not find ourselves worthy to say or acknowledge that I'm in pain? Why do we find the time to tell everybody else and ask everybody else, how are you feeling today? Why don't we find and check in with ourselves to say that I am worthy and I acknowledge that I'm in pain? I spent days when my kids weren't around screaming in the basement saying that I'm in pain and dancing it out to Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. And I knew that I was going to survive. So the truth is, the only way through the pain is to acknowledge it. And when you acknowledge it is when your healing begins. A, accept responsibility for where you are in the decisions that you've made. We're not to blame for everything that happens to us, but we are responsible for how we react. You see, I think I should have won an Oscar for being the self-righteous victim. I had justified in my mind why it was okay for me to be stuck, to be angry, mad, and sad. I had everyone else to blame, my parents, my job, God knows Dunkin' Donuts if they put the wrong amount of sugar in my coffee. But I had justified why I wasn't moving forward. It was easy to be stuck. You know why? Because playing the victim is comfortable. You have justified why you need to stay stuck where you are. It's when you accept responsibility, whether it's 2%, 5%, or 100%. It's when you accept responsibility that you have no other choice but to make a change. December 2011, it's New Year's Eve. My kids were with their dad, and normally I'd be out partying with my friends, taking about 9 or 10 shots and passing out somewhere. But I decided that time that I was going to sit at home. I was going to sit at home, and I cried and cried and cried that weekend like I'd never cried in my life before. Somewhere along the 4 decades, I shut off my emotions and my tears. And I realized in that moment in time that I was responsible for where I was. I was making decisions out of fear and insecurity. Now, I may understand why I made those decisions, but the truth is, I didn't take care of my emotional healing. I didn't take care of my emotional well-being. And I realized that there was nobody that was going to come and save me. And there was definitely no knight in shining armor that was going to come and save me. That I had to save myself. And as the ball on Times Square was dropping down on the TV in front of me, my life took a major transformation. And that was that I vowed to myself that I would never, ever, ever allow myself to fall that low again, no matter what anybody did. And that at that moment in time, that every single time I had an emotion, I would sit with it and I would make sure that it took a priority. You see, when you stop and when you accept responsibility, you can come up with a plan, whether that's spiritual, religious, therapy, a combination. But there is no other choice but to move forward. The F stands for forgiveness. I talk about 3 types of forgiveness. Forgiveness of the people that you perceive have hurt you, forgiveness of the universe, and forgiveness of yourself, perhaps the hardest thing to do. So we're all at war within ourselves, right? Every day we have about 70 to 80,000 thoughts in our head, of which 80 to 90% are negative. That means we have to make a real positive effort to be positive. I used to think that forgiveness was out of my control. It was something that superpower could only do, and I used to sit there saying, I can't wait till so-and-so gets what they deserve. Well, that's great. It might not happen in my lifetime, and what am I doing? I'm burning myself, and I'm holding myself back. When I realized that forgiveness is in my control, I learned and taught myself that the way to do it was by empathy and humanizing an individual. Empathy for the individual, perhaps because they had their own childhood trauma that wasn't processed. Perhaps they didn't know how. And humanizing them, because as human beings, we all have flaws. Over a period of time, I found it easier to forgive and forget people. Forgive people. And for those of you who don't want to forgive for any altruistic reason, but want revenge, I promise you there is no better revenge than rebuilding yourself in front of the people that broke you. So, why me? Why does this always happen to me? How many of us do that? Well, the question to ask is, why not me? Why would we as fellow human beings want other people to feel the pain that we're feeling? We all have different blueprints in life. We all have different journeys in life. Perhaps I'm given something because I've got lessons to learn, or perhaps I have a different purpose in life. It has taken me to be 50 years old to understand that perhaps this is my purpose, to stand out here and speak so that people feel validated for the way that they're feeling, or to perhaps to stop someone from feeling the way that I did. The minute you start to see the universe as part of your team and not against you, you understand that life flows, things happen, and there's reasons for things happening. Forgiveness of oneself, probably the hardest thing that I found to do for myself, even though I knew the reasons I made the decisions that I did. But along the way, my kids bore things that they perhaps shouldn't have if I had a clear mind, if I'd taken care of my emotional well-being. But I forgave myself, and I had to forgive myself because I had to teach my kids it's okay to forgive yourself. I forgave myself by saying that these are the only things I knew at that time, and that I did the best that I could with what I knew. When you acknowledge the pain, accept responsibility, and forgive, there is a liberation that overcomes you, that you just want to live life and you want to release all that pain and suffering, and you have so much gratitude in your heart that you want to survive and you want to live this beautiful life that we've been given. And that is what E is, embrace. Embrace your journey. We're all great at accepting and embracing the accolades about ourselves. But what about our flaws? What about the mistakes we've made? What about the journey, the pain? That's what makes us who we truly are. And that's what makes us truly confident and fearless. I can honestly tell you that going through this in my life, I managed to buy a new home. I managed to have almost 7 figures in 2020. Everything I do is based on my intuition and my gut, because I spent most of my life ignoring it. That intuition and that gut made me sell as law practice last year. It's made me do what I'm doing today, making a lot less money, but feeling a lot less fulfilled. But the truth is, each and every single one of us has a social responsibility to take care of our emotional well-being, because that's the only way to stop the generational trauma. It doesn't matter that the corporations can provide us the resources, but it's very much like going to the gym to stay fit or mastering an art. You have to give yourself that time and consistency every single day to heal yourselves and to deal with the pain that's in front of you. So I have a proposal today, that we're not victims of the world, but we're the masters of our own destiny. So I ask each and every single one of you today, what course of thinking are you going to change so that you can master your own destiny and genuinely enjoy this beautiful life that we have? Thank you.